Why would Mueller threaten a subpoena? What does it tell you about his case?
I think what he's telling the president and the president's legal team here is that they're not going to listen to excuses forever for why the president won't sit down and talk with him. At some point, if he continues to refuse a voluntary interview, if he continues to refuse to cooperate with this investigation, they're going to treat him like any other subject of the investigation for whose testimony they need, and they're going to send him a subpoena. And at that point, the president will have to decide what he wants to do. Does he want to come down? And I should say, if he challenges a subpoena, I think ultimately he would lose in court, and then he would face this option. Does he want to come down and testify in front of the grand jury? Or does he want to take the Fifth Amendment and refuse to answer questions about his involvement in criminal wrongdoing, both during his campaign and potentially while he was sitting in the Oval Office? That's a hard thing to explain to the American people.
Yeah, so Rick, what is President Trump's legal team's move? The president can't possibly continue to say this is a ruse and a hoax and a witch hunt if he pleads the Fifth.
No, pleading the Fifth is out of the question. I mean, it would be a disastrous political move. Look, Mueller holds all the cards here. I do think the president and his team, see, I've read all these questions. These questions aren't particularly difficult or hard. They're just, you know, they're facts. A lot of them have to do with the way he was thinking, right? That's really hard to prove unless Mueller already knows what he's thinking.
They're not hard, except Mueller knows the answer.
He knows the answers, and the reason he does is, for instance, when Cohen got raided, right, his staff reported or told the New York Times that he would talk about that like 20 times a day. Right, so you have to imagine that everything that made the president mad, he talked about 20 times a day. So you potentially have dozens of witnesses who would testify to Mueller already what he was thinking about all these questions that he's saying what he was thinking. Now, if you didn't tell anybody what he was thinking, no one can get in your head and tell you what you're thinking. So you can't prosecute someone for what they're thinking unless there's corroborating evidence about the reasons he did it. So in normal circumstances, he should go and testify, but I don't think he's going to be able to do that. And Dowd was right, and that's why he resigned. And now you're going to have a case where he can get a subpoena. The question now, this has never been tested because lawyers love to leave everything undefined to protect a future client, right, or a future case or scenario. And I do think this may go to getting a subpoena, then having them resist a subpoena, then the Supreme Court. But then what happens? Does Rosenstein take the FBI and chase the presidential motorcade down Pennsylvania Avenue to arrest the president? That's not going to happen. Is this Republican Congress going to impeach this president? Not likely.
Okay, but if Robert Mueller has all the cards, does he have the law? Because, Matt, I want to share what NBC said back in April. Trump's legal team discussed making this case that a sitting president cannot be subpoenaed. And according to people that were familiar with the discussions on this, that the argument hinges on the idea that a sitting president cannot be indicted. So if a sitting president cannot be indicted, can Team Trump make the argument there's no reason why you should be able to subpoena them?
They can make the argument, of course, but I doubt it's going to be a very successful one. There's a difference between the question of whether you can be indicted and whether you can be a witness, whether you can come in and provide information, especially because we know that there's another resolution for sitting presidents. The reason that people believe, some legal scholars believe, and it is not a settled question, but that some legal scholars believe a president can't be indicted is because the Constitution holds out another way to deal with criminal wrongdoing by a president. That's impeachment. So I think if you look at the kind of the total body of law, while this question hasn't been tested, the Supreme Court in the Nixon tapes case was pretty clear. It was a unanimous decision that said that the grand jury's need for information trumps the president's rights for executive privilege. That was true for tapes. I think it would likely be true for his testimony as well. We'd ultimately have to see, but courts have been very hostile to executive privilege claims over a number of different cases and a number of different administrations when it comes to a grand jury's need for information for an ongoing criminal investigation.
Mark, why all the leaks from the Trumpaverse all of a sudden? You've got John Dowd confirming to the AP that Mueller threatened a subpoena. These list of questions miraculously comes forward, and while the president says they were leaks, it sure sounds like they were leaked from his camp. Why is this happening?
Well, as always, thank you for having me. This is not a coincidence. So we look at the timing. Giuliani comes on board about a week or 10 days ago, and this is their modus operandi. They leaked it on purpose because they want to dull the effect for their audience, their Fox News audience, that crazy base that he has. So they want to put the questions out there and make it seem as if Trump is some kind of victim. But what's amazing about it is putting it out there to anybody else says, wait a minute, there may be something here. So I think that's what they're really up to. And in his tweet this morning, how is obstruction of justice a trap? I would be fascinated to ask him, what kind of trap is obstruction of justice, what trap do you think that you've been set up in? And mind you, not only does he have Giuliani, we're pretty certain he's been still having some communication with Roger Stone, someone who has Nixon tattooed on his back. I think when Roger was on my show last year, I always got the impression that he's still on a quest to vindicate his mentor, Richard Nixon. So this is kind of a thing. We didn't win this last time, but we can beat it this time. This is the mistake Nixon made, and this is how you can avoid it. But I think hearing about this subpoena, I mean, that's very, very serious.
Well,
I don't think Mueller's just going to do a book report on this. Not only is slavery not a choice, sitting down in front of Mueller is not a choice for Trump either. He's going to have to do it.
You've just made me lose the day, because thinking about Roger Stone topless at any time is
I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I apologize.
Not for me.
I apologize. I didn't mean to do that.
No for me. Okay, put your Republican hat on. If putting those questions out plays to President Trump's base, and his base says, "Look, he's a victim," what does it do to self-respecting members of the GOP who look at that and say that I mean, Robert Mueller, if he is sharing, whether it's a list of questions or even this information, he's not trapping the president. He's giving him an awful lot of information.
There's two reasons that they were leaked by Trump's side, and I'm not even sure Trump knew about it, but one is what Mark pointed out, is to soften the blow. The other is when Trump tweeted out that it was leaked, he was suggesting that it was leaked by the Mueller team, right? Most of Trump's supporters heard that, and they've not heard anything else. They
okay,
still
those are
believe.
Trump supporters. Tell me what Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Paul Ryan, what do these people who know better, who stand with the president, think of this?
Good question.
Privately or publicly? the one who are in re-election right now, or the ones who are after re-election, and we'll have to see. Look, I wish my fellow GOP members would stand up and have them cooperate. Remember, we said Trump tweeted out today. Now he's changing the subject. Wants to talk about North Korea, right? The reason he's changing the subject is because he's losing this legal battle. I was trying to remember my point now.
What does the GOP think of all this, in public or in private? How do they stand with the president?
I think
You're saying they need to stand
I think
up.
they're all writing it out. No one wants to go to a public battle, which is why Paul Ryan didn't take on the president publicly, which he could have done and will continue not to do, because they want to get reelected, and they feel like they need the Trump base to get reelected. I think some things are more important than that, and I think protecting our Constitution and the idea that no man, including the president, is above the law is something that holds our republic together. Because as I described, if it goes to a subpoena and they resist the subpoena, and then the Supreme Court rules in their favor, as Matt Miller alluded that they probably would, what really happens? It's all going to come down to impeachment, and if the Republican Party won't stand up to impeaching the president over resisting a subpoena, then
well,
where's the
Republicans can stand with the president's lies, they can retire, or they can choose a third lane and stand up, and that third lane is pretty empty right now.